All stories posted on our channel are stories from our subscribers and created by us based on real events we've experienced and witnessed. We post new stories every day for your entertainment that we hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
My name is Griffin Mercer. I was 44 years old, a financial advisor at a respected wealth management firm, and until that Thursday evening in late January, I had believed that whatever problems existed in my marriage could be resolved through communication, counseling, or the simple passage of time. I was catastrophically wrong. "I've been thinking," Cassandra said, her tone suggesting she had been thinking about something as mundane as redecorating the bathroom, rather than what she was actually about to propose. "About our intimate life, about what's fair." "What do you mean, fair?" "I mean that you want things from me that require effort on my part. Time, energy, emotional labor, and I think it's only reasonable that those things be compensated." The word compensated landed with a weight that seemed disproportionate to its 4 syllables. I set down the book I had been giving my wife my full attention. "Are you saying you want to be paid for intimacy?" "I'm saying that intimacy isn't it costs me something, and I think you should acknowledge that cost in concrete terms. We're married, Cassandra. Intimacy is part of marriage, part of the partnership we agreed to when we exchanged vows. Vows are just words. The reality is that I provide services that you value, and services that have value should be compensated. That's how the world works." The clinical language was disturbing. The reduction of our intimate life to a transaction, of our marriage to an economic arrangement. I studied my wife's face, searching for any indication that this was a joke, a provocation, a test of some kind. She was entirely serious. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral despite the turmoil building in my chest. $500 per encounter, paid in advance. $500. It's a fair price, lower than what you'd pay elsewhere, and with someone you already know and trust. "Cassandra, this is insane. You're suggesting I pay my own wife for intimacy like what? Like a transaction between adults who understand the value of what's being exchanged?" She shrugged, returning her attention to her phone. "You can accept the terms or not, but those are the terms." The conversation ended there, not because resolution had been reached, but because Cassandra had clearly decided that further discussion was unnecessary. The terms had been presented. My role was simply to accept or reject them. I chose neither, at least initially. Instead, I spent the following days in a state of suspended disbelief, trying to understand how my marriage had arrived at this point. Cassandra and I had been married for 11 years, together for 14. We had met at a professional conference, both of us working in financial services, both of us ambitious and driven in ways that had seemed complementary at the time. The early years had been good, passionate, connected, full of the particular joy that comes from building a life with someone who shares your values and vision. But something had shifted over time. The passion had faded, as it does in many long-term relationships. But it had been replaced not by comfortable companionship, but by a growing distance. Cassandra had become increasingly focused on material acquisition, the house we could barely afford, the cars that served as status symbols rather than transportation, the vacations that seemed designed more to impress social media followers than to create genuine experiences. I had accommodated these desires, telling myself that people expressed love differently, that her need for financial security was a valid priority, even if it didn't match my own values. But accommodation had apparently not been enough. Now she was demanding payment for the most intimate aspect of our relationship. I spent a week processing the proposition, turning it over in my mind, examining it from every angle. The more I thought about it, the more clearly I recognized it for what it was. Not a negotiation, but an ultimatum. Not a request, but a declaration of how Cassandra fundamentally viewed our marriage. She saw me as a source of income. She saw intimacy as a commodity she controlled. She saw our entire relationship through the lens of transaction and compensation. The recognition was devastating, but it was also clarifying. I couldn't unsee what had been revealed. I couldn't pretend that my wife hadn't reduced me to a customer, our marriage to a business arrangement. "I'm not paying you," I told her at the end of that week. "Not because I don't value you, but because what you're proposing transforms our marriage into something it was never supposed to be." "Then, I suppose we won't be intimate," Cassandra replied, her voice carrying no particular emotion. "That's your choice to make. It's not my choice. It's a consequence of your terms." Semantics. The outcome is the same. You're okay with that? A marriage without intimacy? I'm okay with maintaining my boundary. If you're unwilling to meet my requirements, then yes, intimacy won't be part of our relationship. That's how boundaries work. The word boundaries was particularly galling, co-opting the language of healthy self-care to justify something that was fundamentally exploitative. But I recognized that arguing would accomplish nothing. Cassandra had made her position clear, and no amount of discussion would change it. The weeks that followed existed in a strange limbo. We continued to share a house, continued to interact with the practical coordination that cohabitation required, but the intimacy, not just physical, but emotional, had been severed completely. Cassandra showed no signs of distress at the arrangement. If anything, she seemed relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. I, meanwhile, was drowning. The loneliness was profound, not just the absence of physical connection, but the recognition that my wife viewed me primarily as a source of funds, rather than a partner. Every interaction was colored by this understanding. Every conversation carried the subtext of her transactional worldview. I began consulting with a divorce attorney, quietly, without telling Cassandra. The meetings were exploratory rather than committed. I wasn't ready to end the marriage, but I needed to understand my option, to know what the terrain would look like if I eventually chose to leave. Your situation is unusual, the attorney, a woman named Patricia Hawthorne, observed during our second meeting. Her demand is essentially extortion within the context of marriage. It could be relevant if you proceed with divorce. Evidence of the fundamental breakdown of the marital relationship. Would it affect the settlement? Possibly. Depends on the judge, depends on how we frame it. But at minimum, it demonstrates that she views the marriage as a financial arrangement, rather than a partnership. That could influence spousal support decisions. I left the meeting with more information, but no more clarity. The path forward remained uncertain, each option carrying costs I wasn't sure I was willing to pay. But one thing was becoming clear. The marriage I had believed in no longer existed. What remained was a shell, the structure without the substance, the form without the meaning. Something had to change. I just didn't know yet what that change would look like. The months that followed Cassandra's proposition were an education in the difference between being married and being partnered. We occupied the same house, shared the same meals, maintained the appearance of normalcy for the benefit of neighbors and colleagues who had no idea what was happening behind our carefully maintained facade. But the substance of marriage, the intimacy, the connection, the sense of being genuinely known and valued by another person, had evaporated completely. Cassandra seemed entirely comfortable with the arrangement. She went about her daily routines with the same efficiency she had always displayed, her focus on work and social obligations, and the endless acquisition of things that seemed to constitute her primary source of satisfaction. If she missed our physical connection, she showed no sign of it. I, meanwhile, was slowly suffocating. The loneliness was unlike anything I had experienced before, more acute than being single, more painful than simple isolation. I was living with someone who had explicitly commodified our most intimate moments, who had reduced me to a customer rather than a partner. The presence of another person in the house made the loneliness worse rather than better, a constant reminder of what had been lost. I threw myself into work, using professional demands to fill the void that had opened in my personal life. My performance improved, clients received more attention, analyses became more thorough, results exceeded expectations. The firm noticed, began considering me for a senior partnership that had previously seemed out of reach. But professional success was a poor substitute for personal connection. I came home each evening to a house that felt empty despite Cassandra's presence, to conversations that never moved beyond logistics and schedules, to a bed that had become merely a place for sleeping rather than intimacy. I began to consider alternatives, not affairs. The thought of betraying my vows, even vows to a wife who had betrayed their spirit, felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. But the marriage clearly couldn't continue as it was, and Cassandra showed no indication of reconsidering her position. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" I asked during one of our perfunctory evening conversations. "What specifically?" The arrangement you posed. Whether you might be willing to reconsider. "My terms haven't changed. If anything, I think 500 was too generous. 750 might be more appropriate." The casual increase, treating the price of our intimacy as subject to inflation, was another twist of the knife. I recognized it for what it was, a provocation, a demonstration of power, a reminder that she controlled something I valued and could set whatever price she chose. I'm not negotiating rates with my own wife, keeping my voice steady despite my... Then we have nothing to discuss. Let me know if you change your mind. The exchange crystallized something that had been forming for months. This marriage was over, not legally, not yet, but essentially. Whatever had once existed between us had been destroyed by Cassandra's demand, by her willingness to treat our relationship as a commercial enterprise rather than a partnership. I needed to move on. The question was how. I began attending social events with renewed purpose, not looking for affairs, but for connection, for evidence that human relationships didn't have to be defined by transaction and manipulation. I joined a professional network, participated in community volunteer activities, sought out contexts where genuine interaction might be possible. It was during one of these events, a charity fundraiser organized by a colleague, that I met her. Marguerite Sinclair was 40 years old, divorced, and possessed of a directness that felt like fresh air after years of Cassandra's games. She worked in nonprofit management, had spent a decade building organizations that served under-resourced communities, and spoke about her work with a passion that seemed utterly foreign to the world of financial manipulation I had been inhabiting. "You look like you're having about as much fun as I am," she observed, appearing beside me at a refreshment. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone else who's counting the minutes until it's acceptable to—" She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Marguerite, I'm here because my boss insisted on representation. Griffin, I'm here because my colleague organized this, and guilt is a powerful motivator." We talked for an hour, then two, then realized the event had ended around us while we were absorbed in conversation. The connection was immediate and surprising. Two people who recognized something familiar in each other, some shared understanding that transcended the usual small talk of professional gathering. "I'd like to see you again," I said as we prepared to leave. "Coffee, lunch, something, just to continue talking." "I'd like that too. But I should tell you, I noticed the ring. I don't date married men." The observation was pointed but not accusatory, a boundary clearly stated rather than a judgment. "The ring is complicated," I said. "The marriage is essentially over, though not legally. We're still living in the same house, still technically married, but the relationship ended months ago. That's what married men always say." "I know, and I understand your skepticism, but I'm not looking for an affair or a distraction. I'm looking for genuine connection with someone who values people rather than transactions." That's an unusual way to phrase it. It's an unusual situation. Marguerite studied me for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Tell me more," she said finally. "About why the marriage ended, about what transactions means. I'll decide whether to believe you based on the story." So I told her everything. The proposition, the demand for payment, the transformation of intimacy into commerce. I told her about the months of isolation, the consultations with attorneys, the recognition that the woman I had married no longer existed, if she had ever truly existed at all. When I finished, Marguerite's expression had shifted from skepticism to something closer to sympathy. "That's genuinely terrible," she said, "and it explains why you're at a charity event looking like someone attending a funeral. Does it change your position on dating married men?" "It changes my understanding of your situation, but I still don't date married men, even ones whose marriages are over in everything but legal status." She paused. "However, I do occasionally have coffee with people I find interesting, as friends, with clear boundaries." "Friends with clear boundaries sounds like exactly what I need right now." "Then let's start there. And if circumstances change, if your legal situation changes, we can revisit the conversation." We exchanged contact information, made plans for coffee the following week, and parted ways with the particular charge that accompanies new connections that might become significant. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. The possibility that life beyond my current marriage might contain something worth pursuing, that the isolation I was experiencing wasn't the road ahead was still uncertain, but at least now I could see that a road existed. My friendship with Marguerite developed slowly, bounded by the constraints she had established, and I had accepted. We met for coffee weekly, then twice weekly, then for occasional dinners that stretched into long evenings of conversation that neither of us wanted to end. The connection was unlike anything in my marriage, or at least, unlike anything it had become. Marguerite was curious about my thoughts, my feelings, my history. She asked questions that required genuine reflection to answer, and listened to responses with attention that suggested they actually mattered. "Tell me about your family," she said during one of our early meetings. "What shaped you into whoever you are now?" "My parents divorced when I was 12. My father was an alcoholic who got sober too late to save the marriage, but not too late to repair our relationship. My mother remarried someone kind and stable. I learned early that relationships can end, can be rebuilt, can take forms you didn't expect." That sounds formative. It was. I think it's why I stayed in my marriage as long as I did, because I saw my father's second chances, saw that endings didn't have to be permanent. But I also learned that some endings are necessary, that staying in something broken isn't always the right choice. "Is that what you're doing now? Staying in something broken?" "I'm preparing to leave something broken. The legal process takes time, and I wanted to be sure before I initiated." "And are you sure now?" "I'm sure that the marriage I thought I had no longer exists. I'm sure that my wife sees me as a source of income rather than a partner. I'm sure that I deserve better than paying for intimacy with someone who vowed to love me." Marguerite nodded slowly. "That sounds like clarity. It feels like clarity. Finally, the friendship provided something I had been missing. Validation that I wasn't crazy, that Cassandra's demands were genuinely unreasonable, that my response to them was appropriate rather than overblown." Marguerite listened without judgment, offered perspectives that helped me see my situation more clearly, and never once suggested that I should simply accept what Cassandra was proposing. "Some people would say you should try harder," she observed during one conversation. That marriage requires compromise, that you should meet her halfway. Halfway would be paying $250 per encounter. That's still treating intimacy as a transaction. I agree. I'm just noting that not everyone would see it that way. Do you see it that way? I see someone who set terms that fundamentally change the nature of your relationship. You're not refusing to compromise. You're refusing to accept a redefinition of what marriage means. There's a difference. The distinction she drew felt important, a framework for understanding my position that didn't require me to be either a victim or a villain. I was simply someone whose marriage had been transformed into something unrecognizable, and who had chosen not to accept that transformation. Meanwhile, life with Cassandra continued in its frozen state. We cohabited without connecting, shared space without sharing lives. She seemed perfectly content with the arrangement. Her social life was active, her career was progressing. Her material needs were being met by my income and her own. The absence of intimacy apparently bothered her not at all. "Are you ever going to pay?" she asked the question emerging from nowhere. "No." "Then what are we doing here? Why are we still living together?" "Because divorce takes time, and I'm not ready to announce it to the world yet. When I am, you'll be among the first to know." The exchange was the most honest we had been with each other in months. Cassandra's expression flickered, something that might have been surprise or concern passing across her features before she schooled them back to neutral. "You're thinking about divorce. You gave me an ultimatum. Pay for intimacy or go without. I chose option 3. End a marriage that's become transactional. That's not what I intended." "Then what did you intend? To extract money from me in exchange for something that was supposed to be part of our partnership? To reduce our relationship to a commercial arrangement? I intended to establish fair compensation for something you value. That's not unreasonable." "It is unreasonable. It's the definition of unreasonable, and the fact that you can't see that tells me everything I need to know about how you view this marriage." Cassandra was quiet for a moment, her expression calculating in a way I had learned to recognize. "What would it take," she said slowly, "to make you reconsider? To repair what's broken? I don't know, but I know it's not money. If you think the problem can be solved by negotiating better terms for your services, you still don't understand what the problem actually is." I left the room before she could respond, retreating to the home office that had become my refuge from the Cold War that our marriage had become. The conversation marked a shift, Cassandra's first acknowledgement that my position might be serious, that the consequences of her demands might include the end of the marriage itself. But the acknowledgement came too late, and was couched in language that suggested she still viewed the situation through a transactional lens. What would it take to make me reconsider? The question implied that reconciliation was a matter of finding the right price, the right term, the right deal. It missed entirely the point that my objection was to the premise of negotiation itself. I filed for divorce the following week. The divorce filing landed like a bomb in the carefully constructed detente of our household. Cassandra received the papers with an expression that cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been genuine hurt before settling into the cold composure that become her default. "You're actually doing this," she said, the papers trembling slightly. "I told you I was thinking and doing are different. I thought you were just posturing, making a point." "What point would that be? That I don't want to pay for intimacy with my own wife? I made that point months ago when I refused your term, and I gave you time to reconsider, to come to your senses. I've come to my senses. That's exactly what this is. Me coming to my senses after years of ignoring signs that should have been obvious." "What signs?" "The signs that you view our marriage as a financial arrangement rather than a partnership. The signs that I exist primarily as a source of income for your lifestyle. The signs that intimacy, connection, genuine partnership, none of these things actually matter to you. That's not fair. I've been a good wife. I've maintained the house, managed our social calendar, supported your career. You've performed tasks. That's not the same as being a partner. Tasks can be outsourced. Partnership can't." The conversation devolved from there, cycling through accusations and defenses that neither of us really believed. Cassandra tried various approaches: anger, pleading, negotiation. But none of them addressed the fundamental problem. She still couldn't understand why her demand for payment had been unacceptable. Still viewed my objection as overreaction to a reasonable business proposition. "What if I take it back?" she offered during a later exchange. "What if I say I was wrong? I don't want payment. We can be intimate normally. Can we, though? Can you undo the knowledge that you viewed our intimacy as something you could sell? Can I forget that my wife told me she'd only be with me if I paid her? People make mistakes. People say things they don't mean. Did you not mean it? When you set the price at $500, when you raised it to $750, when you told me to let you know if I changed my mind, were you not serious?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I was serious," she admitted finally. "But I've realized it was a mistake. Isn't that enough? It might have been enough before you actually said the word. Before I spent months living with the knowledge of what you really thought. But now you're just negotiating, trying to find the terms that will keep me from leaving. What's wrong with negotiating? Marriage is constant negotiation. Negotiating about chores or finances or how to spend vacations, that's normal. Negotiating about whether intimacy requires pain, that's not marriage. That's something else entirely. The divorce process proceeded with the grinding inevitability of legal machinery in motion. Patricia Hawthorne proved to be an excellent advocate, documenting Cassandra's demands as evidence of marital breakdown, positioning me favorably for what would likely be a contentious settlement negotiation. Cassandra retained her own attorney, a combative litigator named Bernard Fitzgerald, who immediately began making aggressive demands. The house, the investments, significant spousal support. The initial proposal was designed to punish me for ending the marriage, rather than to arrive at a fair distribution. She's going scorched earth, Patricia observed during one of our strategy sessions, trying to make the divorce so expensive that you'll reconsider. I won't reconsider, whatever the cost. That's what I told Fitzgerald. He didn't seem to believe me. Then we'll educate him. The legal maneuvering continued through spring and into summer, consuming time and money and emotional energy that I would rather have spent on virtually anything else. But beneath the stress of the process, something else was happening. My friendship with Marguerite was deepening. We still maintained the boundaries she had established. Coffee and conversation rather than anything more. But the connection between us had become impossible to ignore. She knew more about me than Cassandra had ever cared to learn. I knew more about her than I had ever expected to know about anyone. Tell me about your divorce, I asked during one of our meetings. What ended your marriage? Incompatibility mostly. We married young, grew in different directions, eventually realized we wanted different things. No villain, no dramatic betrayal. Just two people who should have been better at recognizing they weren't right for each other. That sounds almost amicable. It was, eventually. We're not friends, but we're not enemies either. We just exist in different orbits now. I don't think Cassandra and I will end up there. She's fighting the divorce like I'm trying to destroy her. Some people experience divorce as annihilation. The end of the marriage means the end of their identity as a spouse, their status, their sense of how the world is supposed to work. Is that supposed to make me more sympathetic? It's supposed to help you understand what you're dealing with. Understanding doesn't require sympathy. The insight was characteristic of Marguerite. Thoughtful, analytical, concerned with comprehension rather than judgment. Her perspective helped me navigate the divorce proceedings with less anger than I might otherwise have felt, recognizing that Cassandra's behavior, while unacceptable, was also understandable in its own twisted way. But understanding didn't mean accepting. Whatever Cassandra's reasons, whatever psychological needs her demands had served, the damage was done. The marriage was over, and no amount of analysis would change that. The divorce became final in late September, nearly 9 months after I had filed. The settlement was less than Cassandra had demanded, but more than I had hoped to give. Compromises that left neither party satisfied, but allowed both to move forward. Cassandra kept the house, which she couldn't actually afford but insisted on retaining as a matter of pride. I received the investment accounts, the business assets, the foundation for rebuilding a financial life that had been somewhat diminished by the division of property. It's over, Patricia told me after the final. You're officially divorced. The words felt strange, both liberating and hollow. The end of something that had taken years to build, and months to dismantle. What now? I asked. Now you live your life, whatever that looks like. I knew what I wanted it to look. I had known for months, had been waiting for this moment with an anticipation that bordered on desperate. I called Marguerite that evening. It's final, I said. The divorce is complete. I'm officially single. How do you feel? Relieved. Sad. Ready. Ready for what? Ready to have that conversation you said we could have when my circumstances changed. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. Coffee tomorrow? She asked finally. Coffee tomorrow. We met at the same cafe where we had been meeting for months, but everything felt different. The boundary that had separated us, the fact of my marriage, however broken, had been removed. What remained was the connection we had built, no longer constrained by the circumstances that had required caution. I want to date you, I said, dispensing with preamble. Properly, not as friends with boundaries, but as something with potential to become whatever it's going to become. That's direct. I've spent the past year being indirect, navigating a marriage that wasn't really a marriage, waiting for a legal process to catch up with emotional reality. I'm done being indirect. What if I'm not ready for something serious? What if months of friendship haven't prepared me for dating you? Then we proceed slowly. We've already proven we can do that. Marguerite was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about this too, she admitted. About what happens when you're no longer married. I've been scared, honestly. Scared that the connection we built as friends might not survive becoming something else. Scared that the intimacy we developed in one context might not translate to another. Those are valid fears. They are. but they're also fears I'm willing to face. She reached across the table, taking my hand for the first time in all our months of careful friendship. Let's date, properly, and see what happens. The transition from friendship to romance was surprisingly seamless. Perhaps because we had already done the work of getting to know each other, had already established the trust and understanding that many relationships struggle to build. What changed was not the substance of our connection, but its expression, the freedom to touch and hold, and eventually share intimacies that friendship had prohibited. I discovered that Marguerite was as genuine in romance as she had been in friendship, direct, communicative, uninterested in games or manipulation. She told me what she wanted, asked what I wanted, worked to understand and accommodate our different needs. This is different from what I'm used to, I told her after several weeks of dating. Different how? Honest, direct, like we're actually partners rather than adversaries negotiating it. Is that how your marriage was? Adversarial? It became that way. Maybe it always, and I just didn't see it until Cassandra made her demands explicit. What demands? I realized I had never fully explained the specifics of what had ended my marriage, the transactional proposition, the price she had set on our intimacy. I told Marguerite now, watching her expression shift through surprise and disgust, and finally a kind of comprehension. That explains a lot, she said when I finished. About why you responded to me the way you did. Why directness was so important. Does it change anything, knowing the details? It changes my understanding. It doesn't change how I feel about you. The acceptance was profound. The recognition that my past, however damaged, didn't diminish my value in her eyes. After years of feeling commodified by Cassandra, of existing primarily as a source of income and services, being seen as a person rather than a transaction, was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. We moved forward to building something that felt genuinely new, rather than a repetition of past patterns. I found myself happy, genuinely happy, in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. Cassandra was about to remind me that some endings create beginnings you never anticipate. Cassandra discovered my relationship with Marguerite 3 months after the divorce was finalized, through means I never fully determined. Perhaps mutual acquaintances had mentioned seeing us together. Perhaps she had been monitoring my social media. Perhaps the small-town dynamics of Minneapolis's professional community had carried gossip she couldn't avoid. Whatever the source, her response was immediate and intense. "You're seeing someone," she said, calling me late one evening with the particular urgency that suggested crisis. "I am. Her name is Marguerite. We've been together for a few months." A few months. While we were still married? We were friends while we were still married. The romantic relationship started after the divorce was final. That's a convenient distinction. It's the truth. Not that it matters. We're divorced. Who I see is no longer your concern. It matters because you told me our marriage ended because of my demands. But really, it ended because you found someone else. I found someone else because my marriage ended. The causation runs in the direction I described. That's what you'd say regardless. That's what I'm saying because it's true. Marguerite and I met months after you told me I'd have to pay for intimacy. The friendship developed while I was processing what that demand revealed about our marriage. By the time it became romantic, I was already divorced. But you wanted her. You wanted her while we were still married. I wanted connection. I wanted to be seen as a person, rather than a customer. If that's what you mean by wanting her, then yes. I wanted what she offered, but I never betrayed our vows. Never acted on anything until the marriage was legally over. Vows. Cassandra laughed, a bitter sound. You talk about vows like they matter. The only vow you ever cared about was the one about financial support. I cared about all of them. That's why your demand hurt so much. Because it violated everything the vows were supposed to represent. The conversation ended without resolution, but it marked the beginning of a new phase in my relationship with Cassandra, where before she had been coldly transactional, now she became actively hostile, a woman scorned, though I would have disputed that characterization. The hostility manifested first in small ways. Social media posts that seemed designed to paint me in an unflattering light, comments to mutual acquaintances that questioned my character, a general campaign of reputation damage that stopped short of anything legally actionable, but was clearly intentional. "She's bad-mouthing you to everyone who'll listen," my colleague Richard informed me after an industry event, "telling people you cheated, that you abandoned her, that the divorce was entirely your fault. None of that is true. I know, but not everyone does. She's convincing." The reputational assault was frustrating but manageable. Those who knew me knew the truth, and those who didn't weren't likely to affect my life significantly. But Cassandra was apparently just getting started. The escalation came when she discovered that Marguerite and I were becoming serious, that our relationship had progressed beyond casual dating towards something with permanence. "I hear you're thinking about marriage," Cassandra said during an unexpected call. "Already replacing me with the next model. We're discussing the future. Whether that includes marriage is something we're figuring out together. You should know that I won't make it easy. Whatever happy ending you're imagining, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You destroyed our marriage for this woman. I'm going to make sure she destroys you in return. The conversation ended there, but its implications lingered. Cassandra was declaring war, not the Cold War of our final months together, but active combat designed to destroy my new relationship. I warned Marguerite about what was coming. Your ex-wife wants to break us up, she said, summarizing my explanation. She's going to try to sabotage our relationship. That's what she said. I wanted you to. What can she actually do? We're adults. She has no authority over our relationship. She can lie. She can manipulate. She can create situations designed to make you doubt me or doubt us. And you think I'll fall for that? After everything we've built? I think Cassandra is resourceful and motivated. I think she'll try things we haven't anticipated. Then we'll deal with them as they come, together. The word together carried weight, a declaration of partnership that contrasted sharply with Cassandra's transactional approach. I love you, I said, the words emerging naturally despite the context. I love you too, and I'm not going to let your ex-wife's schemes change that. Cassandra's first scheme arrived in the form of an anonymous letter to Marguerite's employer. A carefully constructed document alleging that Marguerite was involved with a married man, that her judgment was compromised, that her position at the non-profit should be reconsidered in light of this moral failing. The accusation was false on its face. I wasn't married but it was designed to create problems before the truth could be established. Anonymous allegations, even unfounded ones, required investigation. Investigations required time and resources, and created stress that affected performance and reputation. My executive director received this today, Marguerite told me, showing me a copy of it. She had to bring it to the board, even though she doesn't believe it. I'm sorry. This is exactly what Cassandra said she would. Can we prove she sent it? Probably not. Anonymous letters are designed to avoid attribution, so she gets away with it, for now. But we document everything, build a record, and wait for her to make a mistake that can be traced. The investigation at Marguerite's organization concluded quickly once the facts were established. I was divorced. Our relationship had begun after the divorce. There was no ethical violation, but the experience was bruising, the stress significant, the damage to Marguerite's professional standing real, even if temporary. She's escalating, I said after the investigation closed. Testing what works. What do we do about it? We be careful. We document. We don't give her ammunition. That feels like letting her control our lives. It's strategic defense. There's a difference. The second scheme was more sophisticated. A fabricated allegation of financial impropriety against me, reported to the regulatory body that oversaw my profession. The claim was that I had engaged in insider trading, a serious accusation that could end my career if substantiated. The investigation that followed was extensive and intrusive, requiring me to open my financial records, explain transactions, demonstrate that my investment decisions had been made on the basis of publicly available information rather than privileged access. This is harassment, I told Patricia, who had recommended an attorney specializing in regulatory matters. She's using official channels to attack me. It's hard to prove harassment when the allegations come through anonymous tips. Even false allegations require investigation. And in the meantime, my reputation is damaged, my career is threatened, and Cassandra achieves exactly what she wanted. She achieves disruption. She doesn't achieve victory unless the allegations stick. The investigation eventually cleared me. There was no evidence of impropriety because there had been no impropriety. But the process took 6 months and cost significant money. And during that time, my standing at the firm was uncertain, my path to partnership suspended, my professional reputation clouded by the mere fact of investigation. She's trying to destroy you, Marguerite said during one of the long evenings we discussed the situation. Systematically, deliberately, using every tool available. She is. And I don't know how to stop her. Maybe you can't stop her directly. Maybe you have to outmaneuver her. What does that mean? It means instead of just defending against her attacks, you start controlling the narrative. You get ahead of what she's doing. Expose her patterns. Make it impossible for her to operate in the shadows. How? I don't know yet, but there has to be a way to turn her own tactics against her. The idea planted itself in my mind, growing over the following weeks as Cassandra's schemes continued to unfold. She was operating on the assumption that I would remain passive, defending against each attack, but never counterattacking. What would happen if I changed that dynamic? The opportunity came when I discovered, through professional contacts, that Cassandra was in significant financial distress. The house she had insisted on keeping was draining her resources. The lifestyle she had maintained during our marriage was unsustainable on her income alone. The debts she had accumulated were approaching crisis level. She's going to lose the house, my accountant. Behind on the mortgage, behind on taxes. The bank is moving toward foreclosure. The information was valuable not for exploitation, but for understanding. Cassandra's attacks weren't motivated purely by vindictiveness. They were motivated by desperation. She was watching her lifestyle collapse and blaming me for lapse, attacking me as a way of processing her own failures. But understanding didn't mean accepting the attacks. I began to plan my counteroffensive. The counteroffensive began with documentation, compiling every scheme, every attack, every provable instance of harassment into a comprehensive record that established a pattern of deliberate persecution. Patricia helped me organize the evidence, identifying connections that I might have missed, suggesting additional sources that could corroborate the timeline. "You have a harassment case," she said after reviewing everything. "Civil liability for the damage she's caused to your reputation and career. I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for her to stop. Sometimes the threat of financial consequences is the only thing that works. If she knows that her next scheme will result in a lawsuit she can't afford, she might reconsider. Or she might escalate further. She's desperate, financially and psychologically. Then we prepare for escalation, while hoping for deterrence." The legal strategy was only part of my approach. The other part was more personal, rehabilitating my reputation through proactive communication rather than reactive defense. I began speaking openly about what had happened, not all the details, but enough to establish the narrative before Cassandra could control it. I told colleagues about the divorce, about Cassandra's subsequent behavior, about the false allegations that had been lodged against me. The honesty was uncomfortable but effective. People who heard my version first were more resistant to Cassandra's later attempts at manipulation. "You're getting ahead of her," Marguerite observed as my professional standing began to recover. "I'm trying to. She's been controlling the story for too long. Time to introduce some competing narratives. Is it working?" The investigation cleared me. My firm is moving forward with the partnership discussion. People who know the facts are starting to support me rather than assume the worst. And Cassandra? She's still out there, still planning something, but she's running out of credibility. The pattern of false accusations is becoming clear to anyone paying attention. The final piece of my counteroffensive was the most difficult, confronting Cassandra directly, not to reconcile but to establish boundaries that made her continued attacks untenable. I requested a meeting through her attorney, framing it as an attempt to resolve outstanding issues from the divorce. The meeting took place in a conference room at her lawyer's office, both of us accompanied by counsel, the atmosphere formal and hostile. "You wanted this meeting," Cassandra said. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop. The letters, the allegations, the campaign to destroy my reputation and my relationship. All of it. Stop. I don't know what you're talking about." "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Anonymous letters to Marguerite's employer, false allegations of insider trading, social media campaigns designed to make me look like a monster. All of it traces back to you. You can't prove that. I can prove patterns. I can prove timing. I can prove that you explicitly threatened to destroy my relationship, and then attacks on that relationship began. A jury might find that circumstantially compelling. You're threatening to sue me? I'm informing you that continued harassment will have legal consequences. I've documented everything. I have witnesses to your threats. I have expert analysis linking the attacks to your known patterns and capability. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. You destroyed our marriage, moved on with another woman, left me with nothing. I left you with a house you couldn't afford, and a settlement that was more than fair. Everything that's happened since is a consequence of your choices, not mine. My choices? You chose to end our marriage because I wanted fair compensation for intimacy, yes. You wanted to be paid for intimacy with your own husband, and when I refused to accept that transaction, you've spent the past year trying to destroy me. The room was silent, the words hanging in the... "This is what you came here to say," Cassandra asked finally. "That I'm the villain and you're the victim? I came here to tell you that the attacks stop now. Either you choose to stop them, or the law will stop them, but one way or another, they stop. And if I don't, if I have nothing to do with whatever you think is happening, then you have nothing to worry about. But we both know what's true, even if you'll never admit it." I stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "I'm building a life, Cassandra. A good life, with someone who values me as a person rather than a revenue stream. You can accept that and move on, or you can keep trying to destroy it. But if you keep trying, I will fight back, and I will win." I left without waiting for her response, feeling the particular satisfaction of having finally confronted the source of months of persecution. The question was whether confrontation would be enough, or whether Cassandra would escalate one final time. Cassandra's response to my confrontation was the most dangerous scheme yet, a fabricated allegation of domestic violence, complete with manufactured evidence and a prepared narrative designed to destroy not just my reputation, but my freedom. The first indication that something was wrong came when police officers appeared at my office, asking me to accompany them to the station for questioning. "Questioning about what?" I asked, my mind racing through possibility. "An allegation has been made against you. It's best if we discuss this at the station. The allegation, as I learned during the subsequent hours of interrogation, was that I had physically assaulted Cassandra during our marriage. Multiple incidents, documented by photographs she claimed to have taken at the time, corroborated by medical records she had somehow produced. This is fabricated, I said, staring at photographs that showed bruises I had never caused, injuries I had never inflicted. I never touched her violently, not once. These photographs suggest otherwise. The photographs are lies. I don't know how she created them, but they're not real. They look real. Digital manipulation. Staged images. I don't know the method, but I know the truth. I never hurt her. The interrogation continued for hours. The detectives pressing on inconsistencies in my story that didn't exist because my story was true. I had no explanation for evidence I had never created. No defense against accusations I had never faced before. Am I under arrest? I asked finally. Not yet, but we're continuing to investigate. Then I want my attorney. I'm done answering questions. Patricia arrived within the hour, her expression grave after hearing the accusation. This is serious, she said once we were alone. Domestic violence allegations, even false ones, are career-ending. If she's produced photographs and medical records, they're fabricated. All of it. I believe you. But believing and proving are different things. We need to find evidence that she manufactured the allegation. How? Forensic analysis of the photographs. Investigation of the medical records. Examination of the timeline. If these things are fake, they'll have tells that experts can identify. The investigation that followed was the most intensive and expensive of my life. I hired digital forensics experts who analyzed the photographs pixel by pixel, discovering manipulation that was sophisticated but not undetectable. I retained investigators who traced the medical records to a clinic that had no actual record of treating Cassandra for the injuries she claimed. The fabrication began to unravel. The photographs were created using a combination of makeup and digital editing, the forensic expert explained in his report. The bruises are painted on, then enhanced digitally to appear more severe. The lighting inconsistencies between the subject and the background suggest compositing. And the medical records? The clinic exists, but their records show Cassandra Mercer was never a patient. The documents she provided appear to be created from templates available online, with details filled in to match her narrative. So she invented everything. Everything we've examined is fabricated. The question is whether the police and prosecutors will accept our analysis. They did, eventually. The case fell apart when our evidence was presented, when the fabrication became undeniable. Cassandra was questioned about the inconsistencies and couldn't explain them. Her story shifted and changed under pressure, revealing the lies beneath. We're declining to prosecute, the district attorney informed Patricia. The evidence of fabrication is compelling. We're also referring the matter for investigation of filing a false police report. The referral was significant. Cassandra was now the one facing potential criminal charges, her own scheme having backfired spectacularly. She overreached, Patricia said as we discussed the outcome. False allegations of domestic violence are serious crimes. She might actually face consequences. What kind of consequence? Potentially criminal charges, though prosecutors are often reluctant to pursue these cases. More likely, this becomes powerful evidence for your civil harassment case. She manufactured evidence, filed false reports, attempted to have you imprisoned for crimes that never happened. Will she go to jail? Probably not, but her credibility is destroyed. Her financial situation is already precarious, and she now has documented evidence of deliberate fabrication on her record. Whatever she was trying to achieve, she's achieved the opposite. I felt no satisfaction in Cassandra's downfall, only relief that her schemes had finally been exposed, that the attacks might finally, but the damage she had attempted was real. If the fabrication hadn't been detected, if the forensic analysis hadn't revealed the truth, I might have been convicted of crimes I never committed. The close call was a reminder of how dangerous Cassandra had become, how far she was willing to go to destroy me. It was also a reminder of why ending the marriage had been the right decision. Whatever Cassandra had been when I married her, she had become someone capable of manufacturing evidence, filing false police reports, attempting to imprison her ex-husband. The person I had divorced was not someone I had ever actually known. Cassandra's world collapsed in the weeks following the exposure of her fabrication. The criminal investigation moved forward, despite the reluctance Patricia had predicted, fueled by the clarity of the evidence and the severity of her allegations. They're charging her with filing a false police report and tampering with evidence, Patricia informed me. Felony charges, potentially significant penalties. Is she going to prison? The prosecutor is recommending probation rather than incarceration. She has no prior record, and they want to send a message without being too harsh on a first offense. But she'll have a felony conviction, which affects everything else in her life. The felony conviction was the beginning of Cassandra's unraveling. Her employer terminated her upon learning of the charges. Her professional license was suspended pending review. The house she had fought so hard to keep finally went into foreclosure. The financial pressures no longer manageable without income. I watched the collapse from a distance, receiving updates from Patricia, and occasionally from mutual acquaintances who seemed uncertain whether to offer sympathy or condemnation. She's staying with her sister in Chicago, one such acquaintance reported. Lost everything. The job, the house, everything. Says it's all your fault. Of course she does. Is it? Your fault, I mean. Even partly? I asked for a divorce because she demanded payment for intimacy. Everything that followed was her choice. The attacks, the fabrication, all of it. I'm not responsible for the consequences of her decisions. The question stayed with me nonetheless, prompting reflection that I had been avoiding. Was I partly responsible? Had my confrontation pushed her toward desperate measures? Had my counteroffensive contributed to her psychological breakdown? I discussed the questions with Marguerite, who had become my primary source of perspective throughout the ordeal. You're not responsible for her choices, she said. She chose to attack you. She chose to fabricate evidence. She chose to try to have you imprisoned for crimes you didn't commit. Those were her decisions, made by an adult with free will. But if I had handled things differently, how? By paying for intimacy. By staying in a marriage that was destroying you. By not defending yourself against her attacks? I don't know. Somehow. The somehow doesn't exist. There was no path through this that ended with Cassandra happy and healthy, because Cassandra's problems weren't about you. They were about her. Her view of relationships as transactions, her inability to accept that her choices had consequences, her willingness to destroy anything she couldn't control. That's a harsh assessment. It's an accurate assessment, and you need to hear it, because you're carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you. The guilt was real, despite Marguerite's logic. I had spent years with Cassandra, had built a life with, had believed in a future together. Watching her destroy herself, regardless of the causes, was painful in ways that transcended the logical analysis of responsibility. But Marguerite was right. The guilt was misplaced. A residue of the caretaking instincts that Cassandra had exploited throughout our marriage. I was not responsible for her choices, her psychology, her self-destruction. The resolution of the criminal case came several months later. Cassandra pleaded guilty to the charges, receiving 3 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and a felony record that would follow her indefinitely. The civil harassment case was settled as well, with Cassandra agreeing to a consent decree that prohibited further contact with me or Marguerite, further publication of defamatory statements, further attempts to interfere with our lives. It's over, Patricia said after the final paperwork was signed. As much as these things are ever over. What does that mean? It means she's legally prohibited from attacking you, but prohibition and prevention aren't the same thing. Some people obey consent decrees. Some people violate. You won't know which kind she is until you know. The uncertainty was uncomfortable but necessary to acknowledge. Cassandra had proven herself capable of extreme measures. There was no guarantee that legal documents would constrain her if she decided to attack again. But for now, the attacks had stopped. The legal machinery had finally caught up with her schemes. The consequences had finally materialized, and she was apparently, at least for now, too overwhelmed by her own collapse to continue her vendetta. I could finally, fully, move forward. With the legal battles concluded, and Cassandra's attacks apparently ended, Marguerite and I turned our attention to building the life we had been working toward throughout the chaos. The proposal happened on the 1-year anniversary of the day we first met. The charity fundraiser where two people counting minutes until acceptable departure had found each other instead. This is where it started, I said as we stood at the same venue, which was hosting another event we had found an excuse to attend. 1 year ago, right here. I remember. You looked like you were at a funeral. I felt like I was at a funeral. My marriage was dying, and I hadn't fully accepted it. And now? Now I know that some endings are beginning, that loss can lead to something better, that the death of something broken can make room for something whole. I reached into my pocket for the ring I had been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Marguerite Sinclair, I know our story started in chaos and proceeded through crisis. I know you've been tested in ways you never signed up for. I know our relationship has had to survive attacks and investigations and the kind of drama that most people never experience. Griffin, let me finish. I know all of that. And I also know that through all of it, you never wavered. You believed in me when others doubted. You supported me when I was struggling. You loved me when I wasn't sure I deserved to be loved. I opened the box, revealing the ring. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the faith you've shown? Marguerite's eyes were bright with tears. Her smile the genuine expression that had first captivated. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. The engagement was announced quietly. We had both had enough of public drama, but the news spread through our circles nonetheless. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Those who knew our story understood the significance of what we were building, the triumph of connection over transaction. But not everyone was pleased with the news. "She's engaged to him?" The question came from a mutual acquaintance who had apparently received a message from Cassandra. "She said you should know before you make a permanent mistake." "Know what?" "She didn't say. Just that there are things about Griffin that would change your mind." The message was the first sign that Cassandra, despite her legal constraints and personal collapse, was still trying to. The consent decree prohibited direct contact, but indirect messages through third parties occupied a gray area that was difficult to enforce. "What do you think she means?" Marguerite asked when I told her about the message. "I think she's testing whether the consent decree will protect her, sending vague warnings through others instead of attacking directly. Should we report it? Document it at least, in case there's a pattern developing." The documentation continued over the following weeks as additional messages arrived, always through intermediaries, always vague enough to avoid explicit violation, always designed to create doubt about my character. "She's saying you hid assets during the divorce," one message claimed. "She's saying the domestic violence allegations were true, and you paid someone to fabricate the forensic evidence," claimed another. "She's saying you're still legally married to her, that the divorce was never finalized." The accusations were false, all of them, but they were also persistent. A campaign of whispers designed to undermine my relationship with Marguerite through attrition rather than frontal assault. "She's hoping I'll eventually believe something," Marguerite, "that if she throws enough mud, some will stick." Is it working? Not even slightly. I know who you are. I've seen you tested in ways that reveal character. Random accusations from your vindictive ex-wife don't change what I've witnessed directly. I love you. I love you too. And I'm not going anywhere, no matter what she says. The wedding planning proceeded despite the background noise of Cassandra's interference. We chose a small venue, a limited guest list, a ceremony designed for intimacy rather than spectacle. "Keep it simple," Marguerite said. "We've had enough drama. Let's just get married. Just get married." I like the sound of that. The wedding took place on October afternoon, the autumn colors providing a natural backdrop that no decorator could have improved upon. 50 guests gathered in a garden venue outside Minneapolis, the intimacy of the setting reflecting the relationship it was celebrating. The ceremony was simple, as we had wanted. Personal vows, meaningful readings, the celebration of a connection that had survived everything designed to destroy it. "Griffin," Marguerite said during her vows, "I fell in love with a man who was broken and fighting his way toward wholeness. I watched you navigate betrayal, defend yourself against attacks, maintain your integrity when it would have been easier to surrender. I saw who you were when circumstances revealed character, and I chose you, not despite the struggle, but because of what it showed me about the person you." "Marguerite," I responded, "I found you when I had stopped believing in genuine connection. You showed me that relationships could be honest, direct, built on mutual respect rather than transaction. You stayed when staying was difficult, believed when belief required evidence of things not seen. You taught me that love is a choice, made daily, renewed constantly, proved through action rather than words. The kiss that sealed our vows was witnessed by everyone who mattered to us, friends who had supported us through crisis, family who had accepted our unconventional path to this moment, colleagues who had seen the worst of what we had faced and celebrated the best of what we had achieved. The reception was joyful in the uncomplicated way that celebrations deserve to be. Good food, heartfelt toasts, dancing that lasted until the venue gently suggested we conclude. The day was everything we had hoped it would be. But even on this day, Cassandra found a way to intrude. The message arrived via text to a friend who had been forwarding Cassandra's communications to us for documentation purposes. "Tell him congratulations on his second marriage. Let's see if this one lasts any longer. Let's see if this wife understands what she's really signed up for." The threat was clear, if indirect, a promise of continued interference, continued attempts to undermine whatever happiness we had built. I showed the message to Marguerite during a quiet moment at the reception. "She's still trying," I said, "even today. Let her try. She's had a year to separate us, and here we are, married. Whatever she does next, we'll face together. You're not worried?" I'm realistic. She's probably going to keep trying for a while, maybe forever. But her power is limited. She can send messages, spread rumors, make nuisances. She can't actually touch what we have. That's a brave perspective. It's a true perspective. The worst she could do was fabricate evidence and try to have you imprisoned. She did that, and it failed. Everything else is minor by comparison. The logic was sound, but the emotional weight was harder to dismiss. Cassandra had become a permanent presence in our lives, not actively destructive, but persistently annoying, a reminder that the past could never be fully escaped. But Marguerite was right. Whatever Cassandra did, it couldn't touch the substance of what we had built. The marriage was real, the connection was genuine, the future was ours to shape. We left the reception as husband and wife, ready to begin the life we had been working toward for 2 years of chaos and challenge. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The turning came 6 months after our wedding, when Cassandra finally made a move significant enough to trigger real consequences. The consent decree had prohibited contact with, interference with our lives, publication of defamatory statements. But Cassandra had been operating in gray area, messages through intermediary, vague warnings that stopped short of explicit threats, a campaign of whispers that was difficult to prove and harder to prosecute. Then she made a mistake. She showed up at Marguerite's workplace, not as a vague threat communicated through others, but as a physical presence demanding to speak with my wife. "I just want to talk," she reportedly told the receptionist. "I have information about her husband that she needs to know." The security team at the nonprofit was trained to handle situations like this. Cassandra was asked to leave, and, when she refused, was escorted from the building by police officers who were called to the scene. She violated the consent decree, Patricia said when I called her that afternoon. "Explicitly, provably, in front of witnesses, we can file for enforcement and seek penalties." "What kind of penalties?" "She's already on probation from the criminal case. A consent decree violation could trigger revocation. She could go to jail." The possibility of incarceration felt both satisfying and excessive. Cassandra had been tormenting us for years, had tried to destroy our lives through fabrication and harassment, had never accepted that her schemes had failed. But sending her to jail seemed disproportionate to the offense of showing up at an office building. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "That's a personal question, not a legal one. Legally, she violated court orders and should face consequences. Personally, you need to decide what outcome you actually want." I discussed the question with Marguerite that evening. "What do you want?" I asked. "She came to your workplace. You're the one who was directly threatened. I want her to stop, whatever achieves that, even if it means she goes to jail. I don't want her to go to jail for my sake, but if that's what it takes to make her stop, if she's incapable of stopping without that consequence, then yes. That's cold. It's realistic. She's had years of opportunities to move on, to build her own life, to stop trying to destroy ours. She's chosen to continue attacking. At some point, consequences are the only thing left." We filed the enforcement motion the following, documenting the violation and requesting that the court impose appropriate penalty. The hearing took place 2 weeks later. Cassandra appeared with an attorney. Her appearance diminished from the polished professional. The collapse Patricia had described was visible. The financial strain, the professional destruction, the psychological toll of years spent attacking rather than building. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges the violation," her attorney said. She was distraught, concerned about information she believed Mr. Mercer's new wife should know. "It was a lapse in judgment, not a pattern of behavior." "A lapse in judgment?" I responded, testifying on my own behalf. "This follows years of harassment, fabricated evidence, false criminal allegations. Ms. Mercer has spent every moment since our divorce trying to destroy my life and my relationship. This wasn't a lapse. It was the continuation of a campaign." The judge reviewed the evidence, the documented history of attacks, the fabrication that had led to criminal charges, the consent decree violation that had brought us to court. "Ms. Mercer," she said finally, "I'm troubled by what I see here. You've been given multiple opportunities to move forward, to accept the end of your marriage and build a new life. Instead, you've chosen to harass, to fabricate, to violate court order. This suggests either an inability to control your behavior or a deliberate choice to ignore legal constraints." "Your Honor, I'm not finished. The question before me is what consequences are appropriate for this violation. Given your criminal history and the pattern of behavior documented, I'm inclined towards serious penalty. Please, I have nothing left. My job, my home, my profession, everything is gone. Prison would destroy whatever chance I have of rebuilding. Perhaps you should have considered that before violating a court order." The judge imposed a sentence of 60 days in county jail, followed by extended probation with specific conditions. No contact with me or Marguerite, no presence within a specified distance of our homes or workplaces, mandatory counseling addressing obsessive behavior. Cassandra was taken into custody immediately, her expression cycling through shock and despair before settling into the blank acceptance of someone who had finally exhausted all options. I felt no satisfaction watching her led away. The woman being taken to jail was a stranger, not the person I had married, not even the person who had demanded payment for intimacy. She was someone who had been consumed by vendetta, who had destroyed herself trying to destroy me. "It's over," Marguerite said as we left the courthouse. "This time really over. Maybe, or maybe she'll emerge from jail even more determined. Then we'll deal with that too. But for now, let's accept the victory felt hollow, but it was real nonetheless. Cassandra was facing consequences for years of attacks. The legal system had finally provided the protection it had promised, and we, Marguerite and I, were free to live our lives without looking over our shoulders. The peace arrived gradually. not as a dramatic transformation, but as the slow accumulation of ordinary days without crisis. Cassandra served her 60 days and emerged, by all accounts, diminished and defeated. The counseling the court had mandated apparently helped. The extended probation concentrated her mind on compliance rather than revenge. The attacks stopped. Not just the direct violations, but the whispered campaign, the messages through intermediaries, the persistent interference that had characterized the years since our divorce. She moved to a different city, started over with whatever remained of her professional credentials, and, as far as we could determine, stopped thinking about us at all. She's apparently engaged, Patricia reported a year after the jail sentence. Someone she met through work seems to have moved on. Good for her, I said. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for. That's generous, considering everything she did to you. Holding on to anger is exhausting, and she's no longer a threat. What's the point of continued resentment? The generosity was genuine, though it had taken time to develop. The wounds Cassandra had inflicted were real, and the healing had required patience and work. But I had ultimately concluded that carrying hatred for my ex-wife poisoned me more than it affected her. Better to wish her well, and let her go. My life with Marguerite continued to deepen, the foundation we had built through crisis, proving sturdy enough to support the ordinary challenges of married life. We disagreed sometimes, faced frustrations and disappointments, and all the mundane difficulties that relationships inevitably contain. But we faced them as partners, communicating directly, treating each other as allies rather than adversaries. This is what I always wanted, I told her during one of our anniversary partnership. Genuine connection. Someone who sees me as a person, rather than a transaction. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how many people can't clear it. I'm not surprised. I've seen what you went through. The reference to Cassandra was indirect but unmistakable. The experience had become part of our shared history. Not something we dwelled on, but something that informed our understanding of what we had and why it mattered. I thought sometimes about the night that had started everything. The demand for payment, the reduction of intimacy to commerce, the revelation that my wife viewed our most personal connection as a service to be compensated. The demand had been devastating at the time, a destruction of everything I believed. But in retrospect, it had also been clarifying, a moment of truth that revealed what had always been hidden beneath the surface of our relationship. Cassandra had viewed me as a resource to be extracted, a source of income to be managed, a customer to be charged. That view hadn't emerged overnight. It had been present throughout our marriage, concealed by the conventions of partnership, but always influencing her behavior. The demand simply made explicit what had always been implicit. In a strange way, I was grateful. The explicit demand had given me permission to leave, to seek something better, to find Marguerite and build the life we now shared. Without that moment of brutal honesty, I might have spent years, decades, in a marriage that was slowly draining, never quite understanding why I felt so empty. The truth had set me free, even though the truth had been painful. Now, years later, I could look back on that night without anger. It had been a turning point, a moment when everything changed direction. The path that followed had been difficult, marked by attacks and fabrications and legal battles, but the destination had been worth the journey. I had found genuine partnership with someone who valued connection over transaction. I had proven that I could withstand attacks designed to destroy me. I had built a life that reflected my values rather than accommodating someone else's exploitation. The price of love, I had learned, wasn't money. It was courage. The courage to leave what was broken, to seek what was whole, to trust again after betrayal. Marguerite had been worth that courage. Our marriage was worth that courage, and the future, whatever it held, was worth facing together.